We have to be really clear with what our indicator words are in the question stem in order to ensure that we're looking for the right thing in the answer choice. It's very easy to get confused about sufficient assumption versus necessary assumption, but there are key words and phrases in the question stem that help us tell the difference. So looking at this question stem, we have the word assumption, of course, but we also have the key phrase properly inferred if which one of the following is assumed. So properly inferred if assumed. The word if here tells us it is a sufficient assumption question. So more moderate language is more likely to be a necessary assumption, where we have in choice B here at least some very moderate. But then in contrast, we have choice D saying any organization. That's much stronger language. And so even if you were down to those two, I would gravitate towards choice D because we're looking for powerful language that will guarantee the argument 100%, leaving no ambiguity at all. And what we see here is that choice D is actually just a stronger version of the argument itself. It's like a broader version of the argument that can then be applied to the particular case in the stimulus. They're more likely to be really strong in a sufficient assumption question because we're looking for something that will guarantee the argument 100%. For necessary assumption questions, you want to gravitate towards more moderate language because it's more likely to have been guaranteed by the stimulus than more extreme language would be. That's why the negation test works on necessary assumption questions. The correct answer choice, when negated, will destroy the argument, leaving no ambiguity at all. But another way you can approach them is what is more likely to have been required by the stimulus? Moderate language. So you want to make sure that you're viewing the question from the proper perspective. Necessary assumption questions, you want something that is guaranteed to have been proven by the stimulus. But for sufficient assumption questions, that doesn't matter. That's not the right perspective to view it from. For sufficient assumption questions, you want to view the answer choices as new information, and the correct answer choice will guarantee the argument. Doesn't matter how strong it is as long as it gets the job done. I like to think of these as fitting the argument closely, but bigger. So it's kind of like a glove fitting over your hand. It's a similar shape, but it is larger and it's all-encompassing. What question type is this? It's a most strongly supported question. So most strongly supported questions, we want to gravitate towards more moderate language because it's more likely to have been supported by the stimulus than more extreme language would be. Very similar to necessary assumption in a way. The difference here is that the correct answer doesn't have to be true. It's just incredibly likely to be true and very strongly suggested based upon the stimulus. But strong language, like the only way, is incredibly unlikely in a question type like this. All else being equal, I would want to gravitate towards something more moderate, like sometimes or not always or occasionally. And in the correct answer here, we do see they say does not always. Very moderate. Inference family questions, you want to gravitate towards more moderate language. Language that is more likely to have been proven or be supported by the stimulus. So that would be must be true, most supported, and necessary assumption. Those are big ones there. Then on the flip side, question types where you could have powerful language would be sufficient assumption, strengthen, and weaken in particular. They open the door to language that is extreme. It doesn't matter how strong it is, as long as it gets the job done. So it's really important to view them from the proper perspective. It makes all the difference. Strength and principle questions are actually very similar to sufficient assumption questions. We want a general principle that will support the argument, but it also has to fit the argument very closely. Again, like a glove. It has the same shape, is stronger, more all-encompassing, but it can then be applied to the particular situation. very similar to principal application questions. So you see here that the correct answer fits the argument very closely. We're not necessarily looking for the strongest principle overall. We're looking for the strongest principle that is also most applicable to the situation described in the stimulus.